A woman is singing in a kitchen. There is no kitchen anymore, not really, because this is a memory, and memories do not keep their walls, but for the length of the song the walls hold. She is rocking a small child. The melody is simple, the kind a person can hum without thinking, the kind that survives long after the words have worn away. And the words she is singing are about a strawberry, and about losing a strawberry, and about how the things you lose do not actually go anywhere. Let the dust settle, the song says essentially, and everything stays right where you left it, but it still changes. That is the line. That is the whole hinge of the song, and, it turns out, the whole hinge of the show it lives inside. Everything stays. Everything changes. Both at once. The voice belongs to Marceline's mother, a woman named Elise, and the child she is rocking is Marceline, who will grow up to be more than 1,000 years old and will carry this song the entire time, long after she has forgotten almost everything else about the woman who sang it. The song is called Everything Stays, and it appears in the 7th episode of the 7th season, the episode officially titled Stakes Part 2 in the 8-part arc that aired in late 2015. It is sung in a flashback, which means it is sung inside a memory, which means that even as you hear it, you are hearing something already lost. And that doubling is the point. A lullaby is the first piece of philosophy most people ever receive. Before a child can understand a single sentence about the world, they are being sung to about it, soothed into sleep by a melody that says, in some form or another, you are safe and the world will hold. This particular lullaby tells the truth instead of the comfort. It says the world will not hold. It says things change whether you watch them or not, and somehow that is more comforting than the lie. Welcome to Tome. Get comfortable, because this one goes deep and it goes slow. What follows is not a ranking of the saddest moments or the darkest secrets of Adventure Time. It is something quieter than that. Over the next 2 hours, the argument being made is that Adventure Time is, underneath the candy and the swords and the talking dog, a school. Ooh is a curriculum. Every place a character visits, every loss they survive, every mistake they refuse to learn from until it costs them something, is a lesson in how to be alive. But here is the strange and beautiful mechanism the show runs on, and it is the spine of everything that follows. In this school, no lesson is ever taught. No lesson is ever given as instruction. There is no wise old man on a mountain who explains the meaning of life. Every piece of wisdom this show carries is the residue of someone getting it wrong first. The lessons are not lectured. They are survived. To change, to lose, to let go, to grow up, to love. The show never hands you any of these. It makes its characters fail their way into them, one painful inch at a time, and that is the only reason any of it lands. So settle in. Let us walk through the curriculum. Begin with the world itself, because the setting of Adventure Time is the first lesson the show ever teaches, and it teaches it silently, in the background, before any character says a word. The land of Ooh is a post-apocalyptic world. The candy kingdoms and the talking animals and the magic all sit on top of the ruins of a civilization that destroyed itself long ago in a catastrophe the show calls the Mushroom War. If you look at the backgrounds, really look at them, you will see it everywhere. Half-buried cars, crumbled highways, the skeletons of old buildings poking through the grass. Finn and Jake live in a tree that grew up through the wreckage of the human world. And the show almost never comments on this. It does not stop to explain the ruins. It just lets its characters live their bright, silly, adventurous lives in the middle of an apocalypse so old that nobody thinks about it anymore. The entire premise is a lesson in impermanence so total that it has become invisible. An entire civilization changed, ended, dried out where it stood. And life grew up in the ruins anyway, beautiful and strange, not despite the catastrophe, but in the soil it left behind. The first thing the curriculum teaches, the thing the lullaby states out loud before the show has even finished introducing its cast, is impermanence. Everything changes. Nothing you love is going to stay the way you found it, including you. This is the lesson that frightens children and exhausts adults, and the show puts it first because everything else it has to say depends on it. You cannot understand grief until you understand change. You cannot understand growing up until you understand change. You cannot even understand love until you understand that the person you love is becoming someone else while you watch. So the show begins with a song about a strawberry, and then it spends 10 seasons proving the song right. Consider what the lyric actually does. Everything stays right where you left it, it says, but it still changes. Hold those two halves apart for a second, because they should not fit together. If a thing stays where you left it, it has not moved, and if it has not moved, how has it changed? The answer the song is reaching for, without ever saying it plainly, is that change is not the same as motion. A photograph stays exactly where you left it, and it changes every time you look at it. Because you have changed, and the meaning of the picture is made out of you as much as it is made out of the picture. The strawberry in the song does not run away. It dries out. It stays in the same spot and becomes something else in that same spot, slowly, the way a child becomes an adult without ever leaving the body they started in. Marceline keeps this song for 1,000 years and it stays exactly the same song, and it changes meaning completely, because the mother who sang it is gone and the child who heard it is no longer a child. The song did not move. Everything around it did. And the show is careful about who sings it and when. It is not sung to comfort Marceline in the present. It is sung in a flashback, recovered, the way you recover a melody in the shower years after you last heard it. The placement tells you that this wisdom was always there, planted in the earliest soil of Marceline's life, and that she has been living inside its logic without consciously knowing it. She lost her mother. She lost her humanity. She lost, over centuries, the ability to remember most of the people she has loved. And the one thing that stayed was the song that told her things would not stay. There is a cruelty in that, and there is a mercy in it. And the show refuses to separate the two, because in this curriculum, they are never separate. The lesson of impermanence is not given to Marceline as a comfort. It is given to her as a fact she has no choice but to learn, and she learns it the only way anyone learns it, by losing things. The larger arc the song lives inside makes the point even sharper. The stakes story is, on its surface, an action plot. Marceline undergoes a procedure to have her vampirism removed, to become, after more than 1,000 years, mortal again. And the vampires she had absorbed over the centuries are released back into the world, and she has to confront them. But underneath the monster hunting, the arc is asking a single quiet question. After everything you have lost, after 1,000 years of watching people die and forgetting their faces, do you still want to be a person again? A mortal person? A person who can die? And Marceline, in the end, chooses it. She chooses to be vulnerable. She chooses a life that can end over a life that cannot. That choice is the lullaby's lesson grown all the way up. Her mother sang to her that things change, and the adult Marceline finally agrees to let herself be one of the things that changes, to step back into time, to be mortal and breakable and finite. Because a life that cannot end is not really a life at all. The strawberry that never dries out is not preserved. It is just stuck. Marceline chooses to dry out. She chooses to stay where she is and become something else. There is a detail in how the show stages Marceline's memories during this arc that deserves a slow look, because it is doing something the writing rarely does so openly. Marceline cannot keep all of her past in her head at once. 1,000 years is too much for any mind to hold, and the show treats her memory the way it treats Simon's, as a thing that erodes, that loses its edges, that keeps only fragments. And the fragments it keeps are not the important historical events. They are the songs. They are the small sensory things. The shape of a melody. The feeling of being held. The show is making a claim about what survives in a person when the rest is gone, and its answer is not facts and not achievements. Its answer is the felt residue of having been loved. Marceline does not remember most of what happened to her. She remembers being sung to. And that, the show is saying, is enough, because that is the part that was load-bearing all along. There is a way to see the entire series, all 10 seasons of it, as a single long study of impermanence enacted on one character in particular, and that character is Finn. When the show begins, Finn is a small boy, 12 years old, all energy and certainty and uncomplicated heroism. He knows what is right. He fights monsters. He saves princesses. The world is simple, and he is good in it. And then the show does the bravest thing a children's cartoon can do. It lets him grow up. Over the seasons, Finn ages. His voice changes. His body changes. His certainties fall apart one by one. He has his heart broken. He learns that the people he idolized are flawed. He discovers his father and loses an arm to the discovery. He questions whether being a hero even means anything. The Finn of the final season is almost unrecognizable as the boy from the first, and the show never hides the change or pretends he is the same kid. It makes you watch him become someone else, slowly, the way the strawberry dries out, staying right where he was, and changing completely. Think about what it costs a show to do that. Most long-running cartoons freeze their characters. The protagonist is the same age, the same person, with the same lessons unlearned, episode after episode, forever, because a static character is easier to write and easier to merchandise. Adventure Time refused that. It let its hero age out of his own heroism, let him become uncertain and sad and complicated, let him grieve the simpler boy he used to be. And in doing so it taught its audience, many of whom were themselves children when the show began and adults by the time it ended, the hardest lesson of impermanence there is. You are going to change. The version of you that exists right now, the one with these certainties and this energy and this particular shape of hope, is temporary. It is already drying out. And the show, by aging Finn in real time alongside the people watching, made that loss feel less like a threat and more like a companionship. You are changing. So is he. Neither of you did anything wrong. That is just what it is, to be alive in time. If the lullaby states impermanence, a much stranger episode demonstrates the only sane response to it. The episode is called Jake the Brick, the 20th episode of the 6th season, and it aired on the 26th of November in 2014 as part of a week of new premieres. The premise, stated flatly, is one of the most absurd in the entire series, and also one of the most quietly profound. Jake, the shape-shifting dog, decides that he wants to experience a building collapsing on top of him. He has wanted this since he was a puppy. So he shrinks himself down, shapes himself into the form of a single brick, and lodges himself into the wall of a dilapidated cabin in the woods, and then he waits for the cabin to fall apart around him. That is the plot. A dog turns into a brick and waits for a house to come down. What happens next is where the lesson lives. As Jake sits embedded in the wall, becoming part of the structure he came to watch collapse, he begins to narrate. A small animal, a rabbit, has crept into the cabin to escape a coming storm, and Jake, fixed in place, unable to move, begins to describe the rabbit's situation in a low, calm, documentary voice. He narrates the storm rolling in. He narrates the rabbit's small fear and the rabbit's small courage. He narrates the wind and the way the structure groans. And his voice, picked up somehow and broadcast, begins to reach the rest of Ooh. People stop what they are doing to listen. Finn and the others gather around a radio. The whole land, for one night, falls quiet and listens to a dog who has turned himself into a brick describe a rabbit waiting out a storm. And the thing nobody talks about with this episode is what Jake has actually done. He has made himself completely unable to act, and in doing so he has become, for the first time, completely able to see. Think about what that means. For Jake's entire existence on this show, his defining trait has been his ability to change his shape, to stretch, to grow enormous, to become a staircase, or a tent or a fist the size of a building. He is the most adaptable creature in Ooh. He can become anything. And what he chooses, in this episode, is to become a brick, the most fixed and useless shape there is. He gives up his superpower on purpose. He chooses stillness. And the show is telling you something here that none of Jake's lazy, easygoing speeches across the series ever quite say. Jake's serenity, the thing that has always made him the calm center to Finn's restless energy, is not laziness at all. It is a practiced refusal to grasp. Jake does not need to control the storm. He does not need to save the rabbit. He needs only to be present for it, to witness it fully, and to let it be exactly what it is. That is not a small thing. That is, in the language of every contemplative tradition humans have ever invented, the entire game. Be present. Stop grabbing. Watch, and notice that Jake does not arrive at this by being wise. He arrives at it by being weird. The episode never frames Jake as a sage. He is a dog indulging a lifelong, slightly ridiculous bucket list item. The wisdom is a side effect. He wanted to feel a building fall on him, and in the waiting, in the enforced stillness, he stumbles into a way of seeing that the rest of the show has to chase for 10 seasons. He does not pass the lesson because he studied it. He passes it because he sat still long enough for it to find him. This is the curriculum working exactly as designed. Nobody taught Jake to be present. He turned himself into a brick for fun, and presence was what was waiting inside the stillness. There is a second thing happening in this episode that is easy to miss, and it deepens the lesson rather than simply repeating it. When Jake's narration reaches the rest of Ooh, when the whole land gathers around radios to listen to a dog describe a rabbit in a storm, the show is making a quiet argument about what presence is for. Jake does not keep his attention to himself. The act of witnessing the rabbit fully, of being completely present to one small life in one small storm, becomes something he gives away. His attention becomes a broadcast. The entire population of Ooh, for one night, is taught how to pay attention by listening to someone else pay attention, and that is a subtle and important correction to the way people usually imagine stillness and mindfulness as a private retreat, a thing you do alone on a cushion to feel calm. The show says no. The most present being in Ooh turns his presence outward. He notices the rabbit so completely that everyone else learns, through him, how to notice. Serenity in this show is not a way of withdrawing from the world. It is a way of attending to it so closely that the attention spills over and reaches other people. And the storm comes, finally, and the cabin does collapse. And Jake gets the experience he wanted his whole life. The structure falls, and he is buried, and he is fine, because he is a magic dog, and a falling house cannot really hurt him. But the show treats the collapse with a strange tenderness, because by the time it arrives, the collapse is almost beside the point. Jake came for the destruction and stayed for the rabbit. He wanted to feel a building fall, and what he actually got was a night of perfect attention to a small frightened creature, and the gift of that attention to an entire land. The thing he wanted turned out to be the doorway to a thing he did not know he needed. That is how the curriculum works on everyone, not just Jake. You go after some small specific desire, some bucket list item, some fantasy, and the pursuit deposits you somewhere you never meant to go, in front of a lesson you did not sign up for. Jake wanted a building to fall on him. He left having quietly demonstrated, to himself and to everyone listening, what it means to be fully alive in a single passing moment. And there is one final thing about Jake worth holding on to before the curriculum turns toward darker subjects, because his particular serenity is the foundation everything heavier will rest on. Jake is able to be present, able to witness without grasping, able to turn into a brick and let a house fall on him, and feel only wonder, because Jake has made a kind of peace with impermanence that the other characters spend the whole show struggling toward. He does not cling. He is the least controlling being in Ooh, the opposite of bubblegum in every way, a creature who takes the world as it comes and does not try to manage it. And the show suggests, without ever stating it, that this peace is the source of his warmth, that the reason Jake is the calm, steady center of Finn's life is precisely that Jake has stopped fighting the fact that everything changes. He is not calm because nothing matters to him. He is calm because he has accepted that the things that matter will not stay, and has decided to love them anyway, fully, in the moment, while they are here. That is the same lesson Marceline takes 1,000 years to learn. Jake just seems to have been born knowing it, or to have stumbled into it the way he stumbles into everything, sideways, by accident, while indulging some strange whim. Impermanence has a darker neighbor, and the show introduces it early. In the 4th episode the series ever produced, an episode simply called Tree Trunks. Tree Trunks is a tiny green elephant who bakes apple pies and speaks in a gentle southern drawl, and in this first season episode she decides she wants to taste a crystal apple that grows in the most dangerous part of the forest. Finn and Jake escort her on the quest. The forest is full of monsters. And throughout the journey, the boys keep nearly losing her, keep watching this small, fragile, elderly-seeming creature wander cheerfully toward things that could kill her without noticing. At the end, she reaches the crystal apple, takes a single bite, and vanishes in a flash of light, seemingly destroyed. Now, the show brings Tree Trunks back. She is not actually dead. The crystal apple teleports her somewhere else, and she returns in later episodes, and her story continues for years. So this is not, in the literal text, an episode about death. But there is a reading of this episode, never stated by the show, never confirmed, that has stayed with a generation of people who watched it as children and only understood it later. The reading is this. Tree Trunks is the show's first portrait of the way we care for the people who are nearer the end than we are. Finn and Jake spend the whole episode terrified for her, hovering, trying to protect a creature who refuses to be protected, who insists on reaching for the dangerous, beautiful thing she wants, even though it might be the last thing she ever does. And in the end, she gets it. She takes the bite, she reaches the apple she came for, and the boys have to let her. The reason this episode works as the gateway into grief is that it stages the helplessness of love before it ever stages a death. Watch Finn through the journey. He is a small boy, full of the certainty that he can protect anyone, that his sword and his courage are enough to keep the people he cares about safe. And the whole episode keeps gently puncturing that certainty. Tree Trunks wanders into danger, and he cannot stop her. She is cheerful about risks that terrify him. She wants the crystal apple more than she wants to be safe, and there is nothing Finn can do about that. Because you cannot make another creature value their own safety over their own desire. The episode is, in this reading, Finn's first lesson in the limit of heroism. He is the hero. He can fight the monsters. And he still cannot keep a small old elephant from reaching for the thing that might end her. The sword does not help with that. The courage does not help with that. There is a category of loss that no amount of strength can prevent, and Tree Trunks is where the show first lets Finn brush up against it. That is a fan reading, and it is important to be honest about that, because the show never says any of it out loud. The episode plays, on its surface, as a light adventure with a scary ending played mostly for shock. But the reason the reading persists is that the behavior in the episode is real, even if the meaning is supplied by the viewer. Finn and Jake do hover. They are afraid for her the whole way. And the lesson underneath, the one the show makes available without ever insisting on it, is one of the hardest in the entire curriculum. You cannot keep the people you love from reaching for the thing that might end them. Loving someone older, someone frailer, someone closer to the edge, means standing slightly behind them with your hands half raised, ready to catch, knowing you might not get to. The grief in this reading is not about Tree Trunks dying. It is about Finn and Jake learning that love does not come with the power to prevent loss. It only comes with the obligation to witness it. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That obligation, the obligation to stay present through someone's unraveling, is the door into the second movement of the curriculum, and it is the heaviest one. The first movement was about change in the abstract, about the way everything dries out and stays where you left it and becomes something else. But change in the abstract is easy to be calm about. It is much harder when the thing changing is a person you love, and the change is the slow erasure of who they are. The show has 2 episodes that sit at the absolute center of its emotional architecture. 2 episodes that nearly every serious viewer points to as the moment Adventure Time stopped being a kids' show and became something else. They are both about the same 2 people. And they are both, in the deepest sense, about staying. Start with the later one in production order, but the earlier one in the timeline of the story it tells, an episode called I Remember You. The 25th episode of the 4th season, which aired on the 15th of October in 2012. On its surface, I Remember You is about the Ice King, the show's resident buffoon. A blue-skinned wizard who kidnaps princesses and is treated for most of the series as comic relief. In this episode, the Ice King comes to Marceline because he wants help writing a song, and he does not understand why she reacts to him the way she does, with a mixture of grief and anger and tenderness that he cannot comprehend. And the reason he cannot comprehend it is the entire tragedy of the episode. The Ice King does not remember that he used to be a man named Simon Petrikov. He does not remember that he found a little girl in the ruins after the apocalypse and took care of her. He does not remember that the little girl was Marceline. There is a structural irony in this episode that the show never points to, and that makes it ache more the longer you hold it. The Ice King comes to Marceline because he wants help writing a song. He is lonely. He wants to make something, to connect, to be less alone, and the person he instinctively reaches for, out of everyone in U, is the one woman who raised her as he once raised her. The one person whose connection to him runs deeper than memory. He does not know why he came to her. He could not tell you. But something in him, some buried compass that survived the crown's erasure, pointed him toward Marceline when he was lonely, the way a child finds its way to a parent in the dark. The show is suggesting that the bonds we form early get written somewhere deeper than memory, somewhere the crown cannot reach, and that even a mind erased down to foolishness will still, blindly, reach toward the people it once loved, not knowing why, only knowing that this is where comfort is. The episode unfolds through song, which is fitting, because song is what survives when memory does not. Marceline finds an old tape. Recordings Simon made before the magic crown that gives the Ice King his powers finished, erasing his mind. And in these recordings, the man he used to be speaks directly to the person he was becoming and to the girl he was leaving behind. He apologizes in advance. He knows what is happening to him. He knows the crown is taking him piece by piece, and he writes it down while he still can. Messages for a future in which he will not know her, will not know himself, will be a joke that other people laugh at. The behavioral detail the show chooses to dwell on is devastating in its restraint. The Ice King, in the present, does not understand any of this. He reads the words Simon wrote, and they mean nothing to him. He is reading his own farewell letter and laughing, because to him it is just a funny old song, and Marceline has to sit there and watch the man who raised her fail to recognize the love he is literally reciting out loud. Slow down on the central image of this episode, because the show built it with extraordinary care, and it rewards a long look. There is a song the two of them end up performing together, half by accident, the Ice King fumbling at a tune and Marceline gradually joining him. And the lyrics, which are drawn from the old recordings Simon made, are a man trying to warn the person he loves that he is leaving, even though his body will still be here. The Ice King sings the words without understanding them. He is performing his own apology as a novelty number, and Marceline, who understands every word, who knows exactly whose voice these lyrics first belong to, has to decide whether to be angry or to be kind. She has every right to be angry. This man, in his current form, has been a nuisance and a danger for years. But she sees Simon underneath. The way the show keeps asking everyone to see Simon underneath, and instead of rage what comes out of her, is something closer to grief, and closer still to a strange protective tenderness. She joins the song. She sings with him. She lets the man who forgot her have one more moment of the connection he cannot remember they once had. This needs to be stated plainly. The lesson of this episode is not that memory matters. The lesson is the opposite, and it is much harder. The lesson is that love can outlast the mind that held it. Simon does not remember Marceline. The Ice King has no idea who she is. And yet the love is still in the room. It is in the tape. It is in the song he wrote while he could still write. It is in the fact that, decades later, and out of his own mind, he came to her anyway, drawn by something he cannot name, asking for help with a song, which is to say, reaching for the one woman in the world who still knows who he used to be. The show is making a claim that is almost unbearable in its hope. It is saying that what you build with another person does not live only in your memory of it. It gets into the world. It gets into the tapes and the songs and the gravity that pulls two people back toward each other even when one of them has forgotten why. Memory is not the vault where love is kept. Love is bigger than the vault. That is the lesson, and Simon had to lose his entire self to teach it. And then there is the episode that shows you how it began, the 14th episode of the 5th season, called Simon and Marcy. This is the one. If you ask people who have watched the whole series which episode broke them, a great many of them will name this one. It aired on the 25th of March in 2013, and it was the last episode that Rebecca Sugar storyboarded before she left Adventure Time to create Steven Universe, which gives it a kind of double poignancy, a goodbye nested inside a goodbye. The episode is a flashback to the years just after the apocalypse, when Simon Petrikov, not yet fully consumed by the crown, is trying to keep a small vampire child named Marceline alive in the ruins of the human world. Here is what the episode actually depicts, stated as plainly as possible, because the show wraps it in enough sweetness that the horror can slip past you. A man, is slowly losing his mind. He knows it. The only thing that keeps the madness at bay, the only thing that lets him stay himself long enough to take care of the child, is putting on the crown, the very object that is destroying him. So every time Marceline is in danger, every time he needs the power to protect her, he puts on the crown and he loses a little more of himself, permanently, forever, in exchange for a few more minutes of being able to keep her safe. He is trading his soul for her survival, in tiny increments, and he is doing the math every single time, and every single time he chooses her. There is a moment where he sings the theme song from the old television show Cheers to her, to keep her calm, to keep himself anchored. A grown man singing a sitcom jingle to a frightened child in a collapsed grocery store while a monster hunts them. And the crown sits there, waiting for him to need it again. Stay inside the grocery store scene for a moment, because it is one of the most carefully constructed sequences in the entire series, and it repays slowing down. Simon and Marceline are scavenging for food in the ruins of a collapsed store. There is a creature hunting them, a thing in the dark. Marceline is small and frightened. And Simon, to keep her calm and to keep himself tethered to the part of his mind that is still Simon, starts singing the theme song from an old human television show, the sitcom Cheers, a bright, bouncy little tune about a place where everybody knows your name. Think about the layers in that choice. A man from the world before the apocalypse, singing a jingle from a show about belonging, about a warm place full of familiar faces, to a child in a world where almost everyone is dead and almost nowhere is safe. The song is a relic of a vanished civilization, and he is using it as a lullaby, as a shield, as a way of saying to this little girl, in the only language he has left, "You are not alone, and I am still here." And the unbearable thing is that the song is about a place where everybody knows your name, sung by a man who is days or weeks away from not knowing hers. And here is the detail that turns the scene from sad to devastating. Marceline learns the song. She picks it up from him. She sings it back. And that song, the Cheers theme, becomes a thing that passes between them, a small private inheritance, the kind of thing a parent gives a child without meaning to, a melody that will outlast the relationship that produced it. Simon will forget. Simon is forgetting even as he sings. But the song will stay with Marceline, the way everything stayed with her. The way the felt residue of being cared for stays in a person long after the details have eroded. The show is showing you, in real time, the exact mechanism by which love survives the loss of memory. It does not survive as a fact you can recall. It survives as a song you find yourself humming, a tune in your body, a thing you know without knowing why you know it. Simon is loading Marceline's future with melodies, because the melodies will outlast everything else he is able to give her. Watch what the show does and does not do in this episode. It does not have Simon make a speech about sacrifice. It does not have a swelling orchestra tell you he is a hero. It just shows you the choice, over and over, in small concrete actions. He picks her up. He carries her. He sings to her. He puts on the crown when he has to, and you watch his eyes change. Watch a little more of Simon drain out of them, and then you watch him take the crown off and come back, slightly less himself than he was a minute ago, and pick her up again. The whole episode is a demonstration of a single sentence that nobody in it ever says. Caring for someone is not a feeling. It is a decision you make again and again, especially when it costs you, especially when it is unraveling you. Simon does not love Marceline by feeling warmly toward her. He loves her by staying, by carrying her, by spending himself down to nothing, so that she can grow up. And the unbearable irony, the thing that ties this episode to I Remember You Like a Knot, is that the very staying is what erases him. The crown he uses to protect her is the crown that takes his memory of her. He saves her by forgetting her. He becomes the Ice King so that Marceline can become anyone at all. And there is a production fact about this episode that gives the whole thing one more layer of meaning. A layer that exists outside the frame, but presses on everything inside it. Simon and Marcy was the last episode Rebecca Sugar storyboarded before she left Adventure Time to create her own series. So this story about a person spending themselves down to nothing in the act of caring for someone, this story about a goodbye that the one leaving cannot quite say out loud, was itself a kind of goodbye. Made by an artist who was about to leave the show she loved to go become something new. There is no way to know how conscious any of that was, and it would be a fabrication to claim the episode is secretly about her departure. But the resonance is there, available. The way these resonances are always available in the best work. An artist about to leave, storyboarding a story about leaving, about the way the people we care for carry forward what we gave them even after we are gone. The episode is haunted by its own circumstances, and the haunting only makes it deeper. Let that sit for a second. The man forgets the child in the act of saving her. The wisdom of these two episodes, taken together, is not a comfort you can put on a poster. It is the recognition that the deepest love sometimes destroys the one who gives it, and that this does not make the love a mistake. Simon did not fail. Simon won. Marceline is alive because of what Simon spent, but he paid for her life with his identity. And the show refuses to pretend that is not a tragedy, even as it insists it was the right choice. This is the curriculum at its most demanding. It will not let you have the lesson clean. To care for someone through their worst is to risk losing yourself, and the show has the honesty to show you that the risk is real, that sometimes you do lose yourself, and that you do it anyway, because the alternative, letting them go uncared for, is the only thing worse. The show gives Simon's story one more turn, and it is worth pausing on because it complicates the lesson in a way that keeps it from becoming too neat. In an episode called Betty, the 48th episode of the 5th season, the show reveals that before the apocalypse, before the crown, Simon Petrikov had a fiancée, a woman named Betty, whom he loved completely and lost when the crown began to take him. And in this episode, through a chain of magical accidents, Betty is pulled forward through time into the present, into a world where the man she loved has become the Ice King. She finds him. She sees what he has become. And rather than recoil, she decides to stay, to devote herself to curing him, to getting Simon back. The behavioral read is everything here. Betty does not run. She looks at the ruined, ridiculous, dangerous creature her fiancé has become, and she chooses him anyway. Chooses the project of loving him back into himself. The lesson the show is layering onto Simon's whole story is that the people who love us are sometimes willing to chase the version of us that got lost, to refuse the present erasure, to insist that the person underneath is still worth saving. It does not always work. Betty's devotion takes her to dark and tragic places across later seasons, but the choice itself, the choice to stay and to fight for the buried self, is one of the show's purest images of what love does when faced with someone's unraveling. It stays. It reaches. It refuses to accept the erasure as final. The behavioral read carries the whole emotional weight of the ending, and it is worth describing exactly what the show puts on screen. By the close of the episode, the Ice King still does not understand. He has not had a revelation. He does not suddenly remember being Simon, does not weep, does not embrace Marceline as the daughter he raised. The show refuses him that catharsis, because the show is more honest than that, because dementia does not work that way, and the show knows it. What the Ice King has instead is a vague, unplaceable sense that this encounter mattered, a warmth he cannot account for, the ghost of a feeling without the memory that would explain it. And Marceline has to accept that this is all she is going to get. There will be no recognition. The man who raised her will never again know that he raised her. And she chooses to give him the song anyway, to be kind to the husk anyway, because the love was never conditional on being remembered. That is the hardest version of love the show ever depicts, the love that keeps giving to someone who can no longer receive it as love, who experiences your devotion only as a pleasant and confusing afternoon. Marceline loves the Ice King for Simon's sake, and Simon will never know, and she does it anyway. The show holds on her face and lets you understand what that costs. And here is where the show plays its longest, most patient game. A game it sets up in these 5th season flashbacks and does not resolve until almost the end of the entire series. Because Simon's story does not stop at forgetting. The whole arc of the Ice King, stretched across nearly a decade of episodes, is a quiet argument that the person you used to be is not entirely gone, that something of Simon survives inside the ridiculous wizard, surfacing in the moments when he writes a song, or shows an unexpected gentleness, or feels a grief he cannot explain. The show never lets you forget that the Ice King was a person. Every time he does something cruel or stupid or sad, there is the ghost of Simon underneath it, and the show trusts you to hold both at once. The lesson, drawn out across years, is that the people we become do not erase the people we were. They are layered over them. And love, in this show, is the act of remembering the layer underneath, of looking at the Ice King and seeing Simon, of refusing to let the present version of a person be the only version that counts. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The second movement was about loss, about what it means to stay present while someone you love comes apart. The third movement turns the camera around. It is about coming apart yourself, on purpose, in the way every living thing has to. It is about growing up, which the show understands to be a kind of grief you perform on your own behalf, a series of small deaths of the person you used to be. And the curriculum is merciless about one thing in particular. It refuses to let growing up be free. Every step toward freedom in this show costs something, and the show makes you watch the bill being paid. There is no graduation ceremony in OO. There is only the slow, expensive process of becoming someone new, and the show's central character pays for it with a piece of his own body. The arc begins with the first 2 episodes of the 6th season, a 2-part story called Wake Up and Escape from the Citadel, both of which aired on the 21st of April in 2014. The story is, on its face, a quest. Finn has learned that his father, a human named Martin, is alive, imprisoned in a place called the Citadel, a cosmic prison for the worst criminals in the multiverse. Finn has spent his whole life as the last human, the abandoned boy, the orphan who built an entire identity out of being the good one, the hero, the kid who does the right thing because nobody was there to make him. And now he learns that his father is out there, so he goes to find him. He goes, carrying years of fantasy about what a father is, about what this reunion will be, about the man who must have had some reason for leaving him. What he finds is the heart of the lesson, and it is brutal. Finn reaches his father. He finally stands in front of the man he has imagined his whole life, and Martin does not particularly care. Martin is a con man, a selfish, charming, fundamentally indifferent person, and when given the chance to know his son, he is mostly interested in escaping. In the chaos that follows, the Citadel breaks open, and there is a moment where Finn is hanging on, trying to hold things together, trying to save the situation the way he has always saved situations. And his father, to get away, abandons him again. And as it happens, Finn's arm is destroyed. The grass sword fused to his body reacts, the Citadel's energies tear through him, and when the dust settles, Finn is floating in the water with his right arm gone, torn off at the shoulder. And from the stump, a single small flower has begun to grow. Watch the silence the show chooses here. There is no music. The series, which scores almost everything, strips the sound away. Finn is floating in the water. Jake swims to him, asks if he is okay, and Finn does not answer. He just stares at the place where his arm used to be, and the flower grows out of it, and the show holds on his face and refuses to tell you how to feel. This is the behavioral read at its most extreme. The show does not narrate Finn's emotion. It does not give him a monologue about loss or fathers or betrayal. It gives him an absence, a missing limb, a silence, a flower. And it lets you do the work. Because the lesson here is too big to be said out loud, and the show knows that anything it said would be smaller than the thing itself. Stay with the flower for a moment, because it is one of the show's most precise and most generous images, and it would be easy to walk past it as merely a strange visual. Finn loses his arm, and from the wound, immediately, a flower begins to grow. Not later. Not after he has healed. From the open wound itself, in the same moment as the loss, something living pushes up. The show is not saying that the loss does not matter, or that it will all be fine, or that every cloud has a silver lining, which is the kind of empty comfort the curriculum has no patience for. It is saying something more exact and more strange. It is saying that growth and wounding are not sequential. They are simultaneous. The new thing does not wait for the old wound to close. It grows out of the wound, draws its life from the exact place where the damage is, so that you cannot have the flower without the loss, cannot separate the becoming from the breaking. Finn does not lose his arm and then, later, grow. The losing and the growing are the same event, happening in the same place, at the same time. That is as honest an image of how people actually change as any show has ever produced. So what is the lesson? Finn went to his father to get something. Validation, maybe, or belonging, or the answer to the question every abandoned child carries, which is what was wrong with me that you left. And he came back with less than he went in with. He came back missing an arm. The cost of growing up, the show is saying, is sometimes exactly this. You go looking for the thing you think will complete you, the parent who will explain you, the answer that will make you whole, and you find out that the thing does not exist, that the parent is just a person, often a disappointing one, and that the wholeness you imagined was never going to be handed to you. Finn does not get a father. Finn gets a wound. And the wound, with its impossible flower, is the show's image for the only kind of growing up that is real. You do not grow up by getting what you wanted. You grow up by surviving the discovery that you were never going to get it, and finding that something has started to grow in you anyway, in the exact place where the loss is. Go back for a moment to how Finn arrives at the Citadel, because the journey there is part of the lesson, and it is easy to skip past on the way to the arm. In Wake Up, Finn and Jake travel through a strange dreamlike sequence, accompanied by a being they have to keep alive, and the whole episode is shot through with a sense of mounting hope. Finn is getting closer to his father. The fantasy is about to become real. The show lets you feel his hope, lets it build, lets you want the reunion as much as Finn wants it, precisely so that the collapse will cost you something too. This is a deliberate piece of construction. The show could have warned you. It could have foreshadowed Martin's selfishness more heavily, could have undercut Finn's hope so the audience would brace. Instead, it lets the hope swell, because the lesson it is about to teach is not a lesson you can learn while braced. You have to be open, the way Finn is open, the way a child reaching for a parent is open, with no defenses up at all, in order for the betrayal to land where it needs to land. And here is the part that makes this the cleanest example in the whole series of the show's deepest principle. Finn did not learn anything from being told. Nobody warned him off. Plenty of characters knew his father was not worth finding, and Finn went anyway, because he had to, because the only way he was ever going to learn this was by failing into it himself. He had to reach for the father, fully, with his whole heart, and have the father abandon him a second time, and lose his arm in the reaching, before the lesson could become his. You cannot give a person this lesson. You can only watch them go get it. Heroism, the show is saying, is not having the answers. Finn had no answers. Finn had a fantasy, and a sword, and a hope, and the world took his arm in exchange for the truth. That is the price of the curriculum, and the show makes you watch every cent of it get paid. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Before the arm, before the Citadel. The show ran an experiment in identity that quietly seeded everything the growing up movement would later harvest. The first 2 episodes of the 5th season, Finn the Human and Jake the Dog, send Finn and Jake into an alternate version of reality, a branching of the timeline in which the world might have gone very differently. Finn is offered, in essence, a chance at a different self, a different history, a version of his life without the wounds that shaped him. And what the arc circles, without ever lecturing about it, is the question of whether you would take it. If you could undo the losses that made you, would you? Knowing that the losses are also the only reason you are the specific person you are. The titles themselves carry the lesson. Finn the Human, Jake the Dog. The show names these episodes after the plainest possible statement of identity, the bare fact of who each character is, and then spends the runtime stress testing that fact against alternate possibilities, against the temptation of a cleaner timeline. And the resolution, such as it is, leans toward the idea that identity is not a thing you are handed once and keep. It is a thing you keep choosing, scar by scar, including the scars. Finn is the human he is because of what happened to him, not in spite of it. There is a reading of this arc, never stated outright by the show, that it is a meditation on whether a person would trade their damage for a fresh start, and that the show's quiet answer is that the damage and the self are the same thing, that you cannot subtract the one without losing the other. You do not grow up by escaping who the losses made you. You grow up by claiming it. If losing the arm is the violent version of growing up, the show also has a strange, hypnotic, almost wordless version, and it is one of the most unusual episodes in the entire series. It is called The Hall of Egress, the 24th episode of the 7th season. The premise is a puzzle that becomes a parable. Finn enters a cave, and inside the cave he steps on a trap, and from that moment he is caught in a loop. He becomes blind, his eyes shut against his will, and he learns that the only way out of the cave is to navigate it with his eyes closed. The moment he opens his eyes, the moment he looks, he is returned to the start. He has to find the exit by feel, in the dark, trusting nothing but his own hands and his own memory of the space. What makes the episode extraordinary is how far it takes the idea. Finn keeps trying to cheat. He keeps wanting to look, and every time he looks, he is sent back. And the loss compounds in a way the show makes genuinely eerie. At one point, Finn manages to leave the cave with his eyes closed and finds himself back at the tree fort, back home, with Jake, and he opens his eyes, because surely now it is safe. Surely he has escaped. And the instant he opens them, the whole world dissolves, and he is back at the start in the cave again. Even home was inside the test. He has to learn to let go of looking entirely, to walk through his own life blind and trusting, to stop needing the reassurance of seeing where he is. The episode ends with Finn finally accepting this, finally moving through the world with his eyes closed. No longer trying to verify, no longer trying to control through sight. What makes the episode hypnotic, rather than frustrating, and this is a real achievement of craft, is that the show makes you feel the loop from the inside. The repetition is not just something that happens to Finn. It happens to you, the viewer, who keeps watching him return to the same starting point, who keeps hoping this attempt will be the one, who keeps feeling the small drop of disappointment each time the world resets. The episode trains the audience in the same patience it is asking of Finn. By the end, you are no longer hoping he will open his eyes and escape. You are hoping he will finally accept that he cannot, that the only way through is the surrender. The form of the episode teaches the lesson alongside its content, which is a thing the very best episodes of this show do over and over. The way the story is told becomes part of what the story means. One reading of this, and the show leaves it open enough that you have to supply the meaning yourself, is that the whole of Egress is about the moment you stop being a child. A child needs to see. A child needs reassurance, needs to look back and check that the parent is still there, needs the world confirmed by sight at every step. Growing up is, in part, learning to walk forward without looking back, learning to trust a path you cannot fully see, learning to let go of the people and the certainties you keep wanting to turn around and check on. Finn sheds it all in this episode. He sheds the need for proof. He sheds even home, even the comfort of seeing Jake's face, because the only way out is to stop clutching at the visible world. And the show does this almost entirely without dialogue. It is a near-silent episode about the loudest internal event there is, the moment a person stops needing to be watched over and starts walking on their own. There is a particular cruelty in the moment with the tree fort that deserves a closer look, because it is the emotional center of the episode, and it is doing more than it appears to. Finn, exhausted from failing, finally manages to walk out of the cave with his eyes closed, and he makes his way home, and he is back in the familiar warmth of the tree fort with Jake nearby. And everything in him relaxes. He is safe. He is home. Surely now, in his own house, with his brother, it is finally all right to open his eyes. And he opens them. And the world dissolves. The tree fort was never real. It was the test, still running, wearing the disguise of the one place he trusts most. He is thrown all the way back to the start. The show is making a point here that is almost too sharp for a children's cartoon. The test does not end when you reach the place that feels like safety. The need to look, the need to verify, the need to confirm that the people you love are still there, follows you even into your own home. And as long as you give into it, you are still trapped. Even home can be the thing that returns you to zero, if you treat home as the place where you finally get to stop trusting and start checking. And notice, again, the engine of the curriculum running underneath. Finn does not arrive at this wisdom by understanding it. He arrives at it by failing repeatedly, by being thrown back to the start over and over, by exhausting every version of trying to cheat before he finally surrenders to the only thing that works. The show makes you watch him fail dozens of times. Each failure is a small humiliation, a reset, a return to zero. And only at the bottom of all that failure does the lesson become available. He could not have been told to walk with his eyes closed. He had to be returned to the start so many times that closing his eyes became the only door left. That is how this show teaches everything. It does not explain the door. It removes every other door until you find the right one yourself. The third movement has one more lesson to teach about freedom, and it is the one the show is most ambivalent about. Because the show does not actually believe freedom is simple, or even entirely good. The lesson lives in a two-part episode called Lemon Hope, the 50th and 51st episodes of the 5th season. To understand it, you have to understand the place it comes from. There is a kingdom in U called Lemongrab's Castle, ruled by a sour, screaming, malformed creature called the Earl of Lemongrab. And Lemongrab keeps his lemon people in a state of misery, working them, controlling them, hoarding them. Among them is a young lemon person named Lemon Hope, who is, as the name suggests, meant to be the hope of his people, the one who will lead them to freedom. When Lemon Hope finally escapes, finally gets free, the show does something with the story that almost no children's narrative would dare. It makes freedom into a weight. Lemon Hope is out. He is at liberty. He could go anywhere, be anything. And what he feels is not joy. What he feels is the crushing, paralyzing burden of being the one who got away while everyone else is still trapped. He has a destiny, a responsibility, a people who need him to come back and free them. And all he wants is to be left alone to play his music and live his own small life. The episode lets him try that. He wonders. He grows old in a strange time-bending sequence, lives an entire life avoiding his responsibility, and finds that the avoidance does not make him free either. Freedom from his people did not liberate him. It just relocated the prison. Spend a moment on the strange middle of this story, because it is where the lesson does its real work. After Lemon Hope escapes, the show puts him through a long dreamlike passage in which he lives an entire life inside what feels like a single extended stretch of time. Music and wandering and aging, decades compressed into the space of his avoidance. He gets exactly what he thought he wanted. No people depending on him, no destiny pulling at him, just his own music, his own freedom, his own company. And the show stages this not as a triumph, but as a slow hollowing. The longer Lemon Hope is free of his obligations, the emptier the freedom gets, until the thing he ran toward starts to look indistinguishable from the thing he ran from. He left a prison of control and walked, step by step, into a prison of meaninglessness. Both of them are cages. The show is making a point that very few stories aimed at children would dare to make, which is that being able to do anything you want is not the same as being free, and that a life organized entirely around the avoidance of obligation is its own kind of imprisonment, just with nicer scenery. The lesson here is genuinely difficult, and the show earns the right to teach it because it does not pretend the answer is easy. Freedom is not the absence of obligation. Lemon Hope is more free than anyone, and he is miserable, because freedom without something to give yourself to is just a more spacious loneliness. He eventually does go back. He returns and helps free his people, not because he is forced to, but because he finally understands that a freedom you do nothing with is not worth having. The wisdom is this: being free is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a harder question, which is what you will choose to do with the freedom, who you will choose to carry with you, what burden you will pick up on purpose, because a life with no weight in it has no shape. Lemon Hope had to run all the way to the end of his own freedom and find nothing there before he could turn around and choose the weight. He failed at freedom first. Then he learned what it was for. And there is a quiet music to how the show resolves him, because Lemon Hope is a musician, and the freedom he runs toward is in part the freedom to play. He wants to be left alone with his instrument, to make his small beautiful songs, unburdened by anyone's need of him. The show does not punish him for wanting this, and it does not tell him that art is selfish, or that he owes the world his service. What it shows him, instead, is that the music itself goes hollow when it has no one to be for. A song played into an empty room, by a person who has fled everyone who loves them, is not the triumph of freedom he imagined. It is just a sound in an empty room. When he finally returns and uses his music in the service of freeing his people, the same talent that felt empty in isolation becomes the most meaningful thing he has ever done. The lesson, drawn from a lemon boy and his instrument, is that the gifts we guard most jealously for ourselves are often the very gifts that only come alive when we give them away. Freedom and gift alike turn to ash when hoarded, and turn to meaning when spent on someone. This is the curriculum's quiet correction to the way freedom is usually sold. The culture Lemonhope is born into, and the culture watching him, tends to imagine freedom as escape, as the cutting of ties, as the moment you finally owe no one anything. The show looks at that fantasy with great tenderness and tells it that it has the thing backward. The cutting of ties is not freedom, it is just a different captivity, the captivity of a life with no one in it. Real freedom, the show suggests, is not freedom from people. It is the freedom to choose who you will be bound to, which weights you will carry on purpose, which obligations you will pick up, not because anyone forced them on you, but because you have decided they are worth your back. Lemonhope is free the moment he stops running from his people and starts choosing them. The chains he picks up by choice are lighter than the emptiness he carried while he had none. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is a shadow version of this lesson, and the show tells it through the saddest character it ever made, the Earl of Lemongrab himself. To understand Lemonhope's freedom, you have to understand the loneliness it was a reaction against, and that loneliness has its own episodes. The first is You Made Me, the 20th episode of the 4th season. Lemongrab was created by Princess Bubblegum, made in a lab, brought into the world half-finished and wrong, and then sent away to a castle to rule alone because nobody could stand to be around him. In You Made Me, Lemongrab comes back, and the episode is a portrait of a creature who is unbearable precisely because he is so completely alone. He screams. He makes impossible demands. He is cruel and erratic and exhausting, and underneath all of it is a single, simple, devastating fact. He was made by someone and then abandoned by her, and he has never once been loved, and he does not know how to ask for it, so it comes out as rage. The arc deepens in an episode called Be More, the 28th episode of the 5th season, where Lemongrab, still desperately lonely, creates a second Lemongrab to keep himself company, and the relationship between the two of them curdles into something genuinely disturbing, a loneliness so total that the only solution Lemongrab can imagine is to absorb the other, to consume the only companion he has, rather than risk losing him. The show is not subtle about what it is doing here, even as it stays inside its candy-colored surface. It is showing you what happens to a being who is never given love and never taught how to receive it. The cruelty is not the cause. The cruelty is the symptom. The loneliness came first, and the loneliness, left untreated, with no one ever reaching toward this creature with patience, hardens into harm. There is a specific kind of loneliness the show is drawing here, and it is worth naming precisely because the show is so precise about it. It is not the loneliness of someone who has been left. Marceline knows that loneliness, the grief of having had someone and lost them. Lemongrab's loneliness is worse, in a way, because it is the loneliness of someone who has never been held at all, who has no memory of connection to grieve, who does not even have the vocabulary to know what is missing. He was made and then sent away before he could learn that being with another person is even possible. So his reaching comes out wrong, comes out as control and consumption and rage, because nobody ever modeled for him what reaching is supposed to look like. When he creates the second Lemongrab, he is trying to manufacture the companionship he was never given. And when that fails, when even a being he made cannot fill the void, his response is to absorb the other, to make the loneliness stop by erasing the boundary between himself and the only other creature like him. It is grotesque, and it is also, underneath the grotesquerie, the most understandable thing in the world. A person who has never been loved will try anything to stop being alone, and some of the things they try will be monstrous, and the monstrousness is a measure of the deprivation, not of the soul. The lesson the show is building across the Lemongrab episodes is one of the most morally serious things it ever attempts, and it is worth stating carefully. Lemongrab's cruelty is real, and the show does not excuse it, but the show also refuses to let you believe he was simply born bad. It keeps pointing you back to the abandonment, to the fact that Princess Bubblegum made him and then could not bear him and sent him away. The lesson, drawn from the wreckage, is that compassion is not only kindness. Compassion is is prevention. The reaching toward that nobody ever did for Lemongrab is the thing that would have changed him, and its absence is what produced the monster. There is a version of Lemongrab who was met early, held, taught how to be with another person, and that version does not scream. The show makes you grieve for that version, the one that never got to exist. And in doing so, it teaches you that the loneliness of the people around you is not their private problem. It is a wound that will become everyone's problem if no one tends it. Bubblegum failed Lemongrab first. The lesson about compassion is built out of her failure. There is a way the Lemongrab story rhymes with the Simon story that the show never points out and that becomes visible only when you hold them side by side. Both are stories about creation and abandonment. Simon found Marceline and chose to care for her, spending himself to keep her, and that staying is what made Marceline able to love at all. Bubblegum made Lemongrab and chose not to care for him, sent him away because he was difficult, and that abandonment is what made Lemongrab unable to love at all. Two creators. Two creations. One who stayed and one who left. And the entire difference between a Marceline and a Lemongrab is which choice the creator made. The show is not subtle about the symmetry once you see it. It is showing you, in the contrast between these two relationships, the precise weight of the decision to stay with a difficult, demanding, exhausting creature versus the decision to send them away. Marceline got the staying, Lemongrab got the sending, and everything they each became flows from that single difference in how they were met at the beginning. And that brings the curriculum to its final and largest subject, the one all the others have been quietly serving. Change, loss, growing up, freedom, loneliness. Each of these is, underneath, a lesson about connection, about the bonds between people, about what it costs to have them and what it costs to lack them. The fourth movement is about love, in all the difficult forms this show gives it, and it is where the whole video comes to rest. Because the final argument Adventure Time makes, after 10 seasons of teaching impermanence and grief, and the high price of growing up, is that connection is the only thing that makes any of it survivable. Not connection as a feeling, connection as a practice, a discipline, a thing you have to keep choosing and keep getting wrong before you get it right. The show's first real statement on this comes early, in the 10th episode of the 3rd season, an episode called What Was Missing. The premise is a quest. A creature called the Door Lord steals something precious from each of the main characters. And the only way to open the door he has hidden behind is to perform a song that is completely genuine, a song that comes from a real and undivided heart. Finn, Jake, Marceline and Princess Bubblegum band together to write and perform this song. And the obstacle, the thing that keeps the door shut, is that they cannot stop fighting. They are tangled up in old resentments, in jealousy, in the things they have never said to each other. Marceline and Bubblegum in particular circle each other with a tension that this episode was the first to put on screen. A history between them that the show would spend years slowly revealing. The episode is doing something clever with its own premise, and the lesson is hidden inside the mechanics of the door. The characters keep assuming that to open the door, the song has to be perfect, has to be harmonious, has to be a flawless expression of love. They keep failing because they keep trying to perform a love they do not currently feel. And then the door opens, and the show reveals the trick. The door did not need a perfect song. It needed a genuine one. It opened not when they finally got along, but when they finally sang honestly, including all the friction, all the irritation, all the unresolved history. The lesson is that real friendship is not the absence of conflict, it is not winning, and it is not harmony. It is showing up, fully, messily, with all your resentments intact, and singing anyway. The thing that was missing was never agreement. It was honesty. Connection does not require you to be at peace with someone. It requires you to be present with them, flaws and grudges, and all. Think about how counterintuitive that lesson is, and how badly most people get it wrong in their own lives. We tend to believe that conflict is the enemy of closeness, that a good relationship is one without friction, that if we are fighting, then something has gone wrong. And so when the friction comes, as it always comes, we read it as a sign of failure, and we either suppress it, performing a false harmony, or we let it convince us that the bond was never real. The show says both of those responses are mistakes. The Door Lord's puzzle is rigged so that false harmony will never open the door. The characters cannot fake their way out. They cannot smile and pretend and harmonize their way past the lock. The only thing that works is the genuine article, friction and all. The song that contains the resentment instead of hiding it. Closeness is not the absence of conflict. Closeness is what you have when you can have the conflict out loud and still be singing the same song. The friction is not the failure of the bond. The friction is the proof that the bond is strong enough to survive honesty. And it matters enormously that this is a group of 4, not a pair. The show could have made this a love story, 2 people learning to be honest. Instead, it makes it a friendship, a tangled 4-way knot of people who are not all romantically connected, who simply matter to each other in the complicated ways that real groups of friends matter to each other. The lesson is therefore broader than romance. It is about the whole web of connection a person lives inside. The friends and the chosen family, and the people you have known so long that the friction is part of the furniture. What was missing is the show planting its flag early on, the idea that this kind of love, the unglamorous, abrasive, decades-long love between friends, is not lesser than romantic love. It is the anchor. The Finn and Jake friendship is the spine of the entire series. 2 brothers who fight and forgive and show up over and over, and the show treats that bond with the same gravity it gives to any kiss. Showing up, the episode says, is the whole thing. Not winning the argument, not being right, showing up and singing anyway. There is no leader here who explains it. Each of the 4 contributes a piece. Each of them is partly the obstacle and partly the solution. And the door opens because of all of them together, not because any single one of them figured it out. This is the composition principle that runs through the whole curriculum. Wisdom in Adventure Time is never the property of a sage. It is collective. Jake has his serenity, Finn has his courage. Marceline has her hard-won knowledge of loss. Bubblegum has her brilliance and her control. No one of them is the wise one. The wisdom only exists in the space between them, in the song they can only sing together, and even then only when they sing it honestly. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is one more thing this early episode quietly establishes, and it becomes load-bearing for everything the love movement does later. The thing each character has lost to the Door Lord, the precious item that has to be recovered, is different for each of them, and what they value tells you who they are. The show uses the premise to do characterization through objects, through what a person cannot bear to lose. And the deeper point, the one the episode arrives at almost shyly, is that the truly precious things are never the objects at all. They are what the objects stand for, the connections the objects represent. The door does not open when they get their things back. It opens when they sing honestly to each other. The lesson is that the precious thing was never the stolen item. It was the bond in the room, the difficult, abrasive, real bond between 4 people who do not entirely get along and who matter enormously to each other anyway. The show puts this in front of you in its 3rd season and then spends 7 more seasons proving it. The Marceline and Bubblegum thread that what was missing first hinted at gets one of its strangest deepenings in an episode called The Vault, the 34th episode of the 5th season, where Marceline confronts a buried memory, a piece of her own past that she had sealed away because it was too painful to carry. The episode is about the way we lock things inside ourselves, the way a person who has lived too long and lost too much builds vaults in her own mind for the memories she cannot survive looking at directly. And the lesson underneath, consistent with everything the show has been teaching about Marceline, is that the things we wall off do not actually leave us. They wait. They shape us from behind the wall. Marceline's whole guardedness, her habit of pretending to be over things, her inability to let Bubblegum close, all of it is the behavior of someone who has built too many vaults, who has sealed away too much pain, and now cannot open the door to the good things either, because the same wall keeps out both. You cannot selectively numb. The show understands this. The vault that protects you from your grief is the same vault that keeps you from being loved. Princess Bubblegum gets her own lesson, and it is the hardest one for her specifically, because it asks her to give up the thing she is best at. The episode is Bonnibel Bubblegum, the 4th episode of the 10th and final season, and it is a flashback that explains who Bubblegum was before she became the princess everyone knows. And who she was, it turns out, is someone who learned very early that control is safer than trust. The episode shows her creating her kingdom, building the candy people, and it shows the moment a kind of innocence in her hardens into something more guarded. Bubblegum spends the whole series as a benevolent ruler who is also quietly an authoritarian. A woman who surveils her people, who manipulates outcomes, who decides she knows best and arranges the world accordingly because she cannot bear to leave it to chance. There is a relationship at the center of this flashback that makes the lesson concrete. The bond between the young Bonable and a creature she cares for in those early days, and the show uses it to show you the exact moment control begins to replace trust. When you love something and you are afraid of losing it, there are two roads available. One road is to hold it close and trust it to be what it is, to let it surprise you, to accept that you cannot guarantee the outcome. The other road is to take charge, to manage, to arrange the world so that the loss cannot happen, to trade the uncertainty of trust for the false security of control. Bubblegum, hurt early, takes the second road, and the show is careful to make you understand why, to make her choice sympathetic even as it shows you the cost. Anyone who has been hurt understands the appeal of control. It feels like love. It feels like the responsible, careful, protective thing to do. And it is, in fact, the slow strangling of the very bond it means to protect. Because the thing you are managing can feel itself being managed, and no living being can stay close to someone who will not let them be free. The behavioral pattern is consistent across the entire show, and Bonabelle Bubblegum is the episode that explains its root. Bubblegum controls because she is afraid. She has lost things, she has seen what happens when she is not watching, and she has concluded that love means management, that the way to keep the people she cares about safe is to keep them under her eye, to plan their lives, to intervene. And the show, gently and across many years, tells her she is wrong. Her control pushes people away. It is part of what put distance between her and Marceline for so long, because you cannot be that close to someone you are trying to manage. The lesson Bubblegum has to learn, the lesson the final season keeps pressing on her, is that control is not care. They feel the same from the inside, the same protective urgency, the same love, but they are opposites in their effect. To control someone is to refuse to trust them, and to refuse to trust them is, in the end, a way of refusing to truly let them be a person. The flashback in this episode is careful to show you that Bubblegum was not always like this. There is an earlier version of her, a more open and trusting version, and the episode lets you watch the moment that openness begins to close. She experiences a betrayal, a loss, a sense that the world is not safe, and that the people in it cannot simply be trusted to do right. And out of that experience, she builds the control that will define her for the rest of the series. The show is doing something compassionate here, something it does for almost all of its difficult characters. It refuses to let you write Bubblegum off as simply a control freak. It shows you the wound that the control grew out of. Her need to manage everything is not arrogance, or not only arrogance. It is fear, wearing the costume of competence. She controls because once, long ago, she trusted, and trusting cost her, and she decided never to be that exposed again. The lesson she has to learn is therefore not a lesson about being less bossy. It is a lesson about being brave enough to be hurt again, which is a far harder thing to ask of anyone. What makes this land is that Bubblegum does not learn it quickly or cleanly. She fails at it for the entire series. She keeps reaching for control, keeps manipulating, keeps deciding she knows best, and keeps watching it cost her the closeness she actually wants. The lesson is earned the way every lesson in this show is earned, through the long accumulation of failure, through watching the same mistake recur until its cost becomes undeniable. Bubblegum is perhaps the show's clearest proof that intelligence does not save you from the curriculum. She is the smartest person in OO, and being smart does not let her skip the lesson. She still has to fail at trust over and over before she can begin to choose it. Wisdom is not intelligence. Bubblegum had to learn that the hard way, which is the only way this show lets anyone learn anything. And there is a particular tenderness in the fact that the lesson the smartest person in the world cannot learn is the simplest one. A child knows how to trust. Trust is the default state of a person who has not yet been hurt. What Bubblegum has done across her long life is build an enormous, intricate intelligence specifically in order to never have to trust again. To replace the vulnerability of trust with the safety of knowing and managing and planning. Her brilliance is in a sense a monument to her fear, a vast and impressive structure built for the single purpose of keeping her from ever again being as exposed as she was the day she first got hurt. And that is why intelligence cannot save her. The intelligence is the problem. The thing she has to do is not think harder. It is the opposite. It is to set the thinking down, to stop managing, to let someone close enough to hurt her, to be, for once, as defenseless as the child she was before she got smart. The hardest thing in the world for a brilliant, wounded person is to be simple again. Bubblegum spends 10 seasons failing at it, and passes only at the very end, only with Marceline, only when the threat of losing her makes the safety of control suddenly worthless. The slow thaw between Bubblegum and Marceline runs underneath all of this, and the show tracks it in small, careful episodes long before it ever becomes explicit. In Sky Witch, the 29th episode of the 5th season, there is a quiet revelation that the show treats almost as a throwaway, and that fans seized on immediately. Marceline owns a shirt, a worn old band shirt that she sleeps in, that she treasures. And the episode reveals, without comment, that the shirt was a gift from Bubblegum. The show does not stop to explain it. It does not have a character announce its significance. It just lets you see that Marceline, who acts as though she is over Bubblegum, who keeps her at arm's length, has been sleeping in Bubblegum's shirt this whole time. The behavioral read does all the work. You do not need to be told what the shirt means. The shirt means everything, and the show trusts you to know it without a single line of dialogue insisting on it. This is the show's whole method of teaching about love compressed into a single object. Marceline says, in effect, that she does not care about Bubblegum, that she is over it, that the distance between them is fine. And then she goes to sleep every night in a shirt Bubblegum gave her. Those two things cannot both be true. The words say one thing, and the behavior says the opposite. And when a person's words and behavior contradict, the show always trusts the behavior. The shirt is the truth. The detachment is the performance. And the reason this matters for the whole curriculum is that it shows you how to read the people in your own life, including yourself. People will tell you they are over things while they sleep in the evidence that they are not. They will say they do not care while keeping the gift, holding the grudge, returning again and again to the person they claim to have left behind. The show is teaching you, through Marceline's shirt, that if you want to know what someone loves, you should watch what they keep, not listen to what they say. The mouth lies to protect the heart, the hands tell the truth, and there is a tenderness in the fact that the show makes the audience the keeper of this secret. Bubblegum does not know, in the moment, what the shirt means to Marceline. Marceline would never admit it. The only ones who hold the full weight of the gesture are the people watching, who have been given a piece of knowledge about these two characters that neither character will say out loud. This is a kind of intimacy the show extends to its audience, a trust. It does not over-explain its emotional truths because it believes you can see them. It hands you the shirt and lets you understand, on your own, that you are looking at a love that has been quietly surviving years of denial. And learning to see that, learning to read the buried devotion underneath the performed indifference, is one of the most useful things a person can carry out of any story and back into the messy, guarded, real relationships of an actual life. All of these threads, every lesson the curriculum has taught, the lullaby about change, the dog who became a brick to learn presence, the man who forgot the girl he saved, the boy who lost an arm reaching for a father, the lemon person who had to run to the end of freedom to learn its weight, the princess who had to fail at trust for 10 seasons. Every single one of them comes together in the last 44 minutes of the show. The finale is where the curriculum holds its final exam, and the answer it gives, after everything, is gentler than anything the show has earned the right to be. The finale is called Come Along With Me. It is the 13th episode of the 10th season, a single extended episode running roughly 44 minutes. And it had to somehow close a story that had been running since 2010, since the 5th of April of that year, all the way to its end on the 3rd of September in 2018. 8 years. 10 seasons. Hundreds of episodes. All of it had to land here. Consider the sheer weight of what this episode had to do, It is, in production terms, a single 44-minute special. Though some databases count it across multiple numbered slots for runtime purposes, and it carries the burden of ending a story that ran from the spring of 2010 to the late summer of 2018. The series passed through more than one showrunner in that time. It began under its creator, Pendleton Ward, who later stepped back from running the show, with Adam Muto taking over as showrunner for its later years. Rebecca Sugar, who had storyboarded some of its most beloved episodes, had left in the 5th season to create Steven Universe. An entire generation of artists had passed through this show, leaving fingerprints on it, and the finale had to honor all of them and all of the audience that had grown up alongside it. A finale like that could so easily have been a frantic spectacle, a wall of fan service, a desperate attempt to resolve every dangling thread. What the show chose instead was a song and a feeling. It chose to slow down at the exact moment most stories speed up. The finale opens with a song, and the song is the key to everything the show has been building toward. It is called Time Adventure, and it is sung by the characters, led by Mo, the little living video game console who has been the show's purest heart all along. Rebecca Sugar, who had left the show years earlier to make Steven Universe, came back specifically to write this song for the ending. And the song says the thing the whole series has been circling. It says that the people you love are with you always, that the moment you are in is happening forever in some sense, that what we built does not end when the present ends. Let the song speak for itself in essence, rather than in exact words. It tells the listener that this moment, the one they are in right now, will happen again and again, that the connection between people is not erased by time, but folded into it, that the ending is not an ending. The song is a lullaby, in the end, the same shape as the one Marceline's mother sang at the very beginning. The show closes the loop. It opened on a mother singing to a child that everything changes, and it ends on a group of friends singing to each other that everything stays. Stay with what the song is actually doing, because it is the thesis of the entire series stated as music, rather than as argument. Time Adventure does not promise that nothing will end. The show is far too honest for that. It has spent 10 seasons proving that everything ends. What the song promises is something stranger and more durable, which is that the moment does not stop existing just because it stops being now. The connection between people, the song insists, is woven into time itself, so that the moment you are sharing with someone is, in some sense, permanent, fixed into the structure of what has happened, unable to be undone even by the loss of the people who lived it. This is the lullaby's logic, carried all the way to its conclusion. Everything stays right where you left it, but it still changes. The moment stays. You change. The people you loved stay folded into the time you spent with them, exactly where you left them, even as everything moves on around them. The song is not denying impermanence. It is reconciling you to it. It is the most grown-up comfort the show has to offer, which is the recognition that loss and permanence are not opposites, that the thing you lose is also, in the only way that finally matters, kept. And inside this finale, the show finally lets one of its longest, most patient threads resolve. Marceline and Bubblegum, the two women who have circled each other for the entire series, who exchanged the shirt, who could not be close because one of them could not stop trying to control, and the other could not stop pretending to be over it, finally come together. In the heat of the finale's danger, with the world threatened, the two of them share a kiss, and the show makes canon what it had been quietly building for years. This is the resolution of Bubblegum's whole arc. She learns to trust. She learns to let herself be close to someone she cannot manage. And it is the resolution of Marceline's whole arc too. The arc that started with a mother singing about loss. The arc of a girl who learned so early that everything she loves disappears, that she stopped letting herself love openly at all. Marceline learns to let herself be loved. After 1,000 years of bracing for loss, she lets someone in. The far future flash forward at the very end of the series deserves to be looked at directly, because it is where the show finally pays off the lesson of the ruins it opened on. The finale, after resolving its immediate crisis, leaps forward in time, far past the lives of the characters we have followed, into a future where new creatures live, where the events of the series have become old stories, where the friends we love are gone. And the show stages this, not as a tragedy, but as a continuation. the same way it staged the ruins of the human world at the very beginning. The Mushroom War destroyed a civilization, and life grew up in the ruins. And that life was the show we watched. Now the show is showing you the next layer. The lives we watched will themselves become a kind of ruin, a foundation, a soil, and new life will grow up on top of them, and it will be beautiful and strange and worth living, the same way Ooh was. The flash forward is the show keeping faith with its own opening premise. It told you at the start that everything ends and life grows in the wreckage. It tells you at the end that this is not a curse. It is simply how the world works, over and over, forever, and there is a deep peace available to anyone willing to see it that way. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Sit with how long that took. Marceline's lesson, the one she had been failing at since the very first frame of this video, since her mother sang her a lullaby about a strawberry that dries up and stays where you left it, was simply this: that the certainty of loss is not a reason to refuse love. She watched her mother disappear. She watched Simon forget her. She spent centuries learning, over and over, that everything she loves will change and leave and be erased, and the natural conclusion from all that evidence is to stop loving, to protect yourself, to keep everyone at the distance she kept bubblegum at for years. And the finale says no. The finale says that the whole point, the thing all that loss was supposed to teach and never could until the very end, is that love is worth it precisely because it does not last. You let yourself be loved not despite the impermanence, but because of it. Everything changes. Love anyway. That is the lesson Marceline failed at for 1,000 years, and she passes it in the last hour of the show, in a kiss, with the world ending around her. Return to the kiss for a moment, and notice how the show stages it, because the staging is the lesson. It does not happen in a quiet, candlelit, carefully prepared, romantic scene. It happens in the middle of a crisis, when one of them believes the other may be about to die, when there is no time left to be careful, and no reason left to pretend. The danger strips away the defenses that years of peace had kept intact. Bubblegum, who has controlled and managed and kept her distance, and Marceline, who has pretended to be over it for the entire series, are finally in a situation where pretending is pointless, where control is impossible, where the only honest thing left to do is to stop performing and reach for each other. And they do. The lesson folded into the timing is that sometimes it takes the threat of loss to break the habit of self-protection. Both of them had been protecting themselves from each other for years, Bubblegum through control and Marceline through detachment, and it took the imminence of an ending to make them admit that the protection was costing them the only thing either of them actually wanted. And consider what this resolution says about everything the show taught in its earlier movements. Marceline learned impermanence first, before any of the other characters, learned it in her mother's lullaby, and relearned it across 1,000 years of loss. And the natural conclusion from all that learning, the safe conclusion, the conclusion a wounded person reaches, is to never love openly again. Because everything you love will be taken. Bubblegum learned a parallel lesson through control, concluding that the way to keep what you love is to manage it, to never let it out of your sight, to plan against loss. Both of them had built entire personalities out of their defenses against impermanence. And the finale tells them, and tells you, that the defenses were the real loss all along. The thing they were protecting themselves from, the pain of loving something that will change and end, is the exact thing that makes a life worth having. They spent the whole show getting it wrong, each in her own way, and they passed the lesson in the last hour, together, because the only way either of them could pass it was with the other. And here is the final move, the one that makes Come Along With Me the perfect graduation for this entire curriculum. The show does not end on a victory. It does not end on the villain defeated and the world made permanent and safe. It ends on continuation. The very last sequence of the series flashes forward, far into the future, to a time long after the characters we know are gone. And it shows that the world goes on, that new beings live in Ooh, that the song the characters sang is still being sung, that the friendships and the losses and the lessons did not stop the world from changing, and did not get erased by the change either. They both happened. Everything stayed. Everything changed. The finale is the lullaby made into an ending. It tells you, as gently as a mother singing a frightened child to sleep, that the end is not a death. It is a continuation. The people you love are folded into the time that comes after them. They stay where you left them and they change, and you carry the song. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Step back now and look at the shape of the whole curriculum, because the shape is the final lesson, the one that contains all the others. Notice that not a single thing in this video was taught by a teacher. There is no sage in Adventure Time. There is no character who sits the others down and explains the meaning of change, or grief, or freedom, or love. Jake does not lecture anyone on presence. He turns into a brick and stumbles into it. Simon does not give a speech on sacrifice. He simply keeps putting on the crown, paying for Marceline's life one memory at a time, until there is nothing left of him. Finn does not receive a lesson about fathers. He loses an arm reaching for one. Bubblegum does not learn humility from advice. She fails at trust for 10 seasons until the cost becomes unbearable. Lemonhoe does not get told what freedom is for. He runs to the end of his and finds it empty. Marceline does not get talked out of her fear of loss. She lives 1,000 years inside it and only lets it go at the very end. And look at how the show distributes the teaching, because the distribution is itself a lesson, perhaps the most important one. In a lesser story, there would be a wise character, a mentor, a sage who stands slightly apart from the others and dispenses understanding. Adventure Time pointedly refuses to build one. The closest the show comes to a wise elder is the Ice King, and the Ice King is a fool, a kidnapper, a ruined man who cannot remember his own name. The closest it comes to a brilliant authority is Princess Bubblegum, and her brilliance is precisely what keeps tripping her, her intelligence a kind of trap that prevents her from learning the one thing she most needs. The show systematically denies you a guru. There is no one to defer to. No one whose understanding you can simply borrow. Instead, the wisdom is scattered, broken into pieces, each piece held by a flawed and partial character who earned exactly that one piece by failing at exactly that one thing. This means the show is making a quiet argument about where wisdom actually lives. And it is an argument worth taking seriously. It is saying that wisdom is not a possession of remarkable individuals. It is a property of communities. No single person in your life knows how to live. Your wisest friend is a disaster in some area where someone else you know is steady. The person who taught you about grief may know nothing about joy. The one who models patience may be hopeless at honesty. And the only way any of us becomes anything like wise is by being embedded in a web of other people, each of whom has paid for one piece of the truth, and by being humble enough to learn our missing pieces from them. Ooh works exactly this way. Jake teaches Finn to slow down. Finn teaches Jake to care about things that are hard. Marceline teaches Bubblegum to feel. Bubblegum teaches Marceline to commit. Nobody is whole. Everybody is necessary. The community is the sage, and no member of it is. There is a freedom in being told this, a weight lifted, especially for anyone lying awake at night, measuring themselves against the people who seem to have it figured out. Nobody has it figured out. The show is telling you, through every flawed and partial character it loves, that the wise person you imagine, the one who has resolved their grief and mastered their fear and learned to love without clinging, does not exist, and never did. There are only people who have failed into one or two pieces of understanding and are still hopeless about the rest, leaning on each other, covering each other's blind spots, getting through. If Marceline, 1,000 years old, is still learning to let herself be loved, then you are not behind. If Bubblegum, the smartest person in her world, still cannot stop trying to control what she loves, then your own failures are not a verdict on you. They are the curriculum. They are how it works. The show grants you the enormous mercy of permission to be exactly as unfinished as you are. This is what it means to call OO a school where no lesson is ever taught, only survived. The wisdom of this show is real, and it is deep, and it would change a person to actually absorb it. But it is never delivered as wisdom. It is always delivered as consequence. Every piece of insight the show carries is the residue of someone getting it wrong first, paying for the mistake, and being changed by the payment. That is why none of it feels like a lecture, and that is why it lands the way almost nothing else in animation lands. You do not believe these lessons because a wise character told you they were true. You believe them because you watched real characters you love fail their way into them, at real cost, over real years. The lesson is never given. It is earned, and the show makes you watch every payment. Which is why, when the lesson finally arrives, it does not feel like instruction. It feels like the truth. Consider, too, what it means that the lessons had to be survived rather than taught. Because this is not just a description of how the show is written. It is a claim about how wisdom actually works in a human life, and it is the most useful thing the show has to give you. Think about every genuinely important thing you know about being alive. The really load-bearing knowledge, the kind that changed how you move through the world. Almost none of it came from being told. You were told 1,000 true things as a child, by parents and teachers and books, and most of them washed over you and meant nothing until the day you lived the thing they described. Someone told you that grief would pass, and it meant nothing until you grieved. Someone told you not to try to control the people you love, and it meant nothing until you tried and watched it fail. The truths were available the whole time, sitting there like the lullaby, waiting. But a truth you have only been told is not yet a truth you possess. It becomes yours only when you have failed your way into it, paid for it, been changed by the paying. The show is built on this principle because the show understands that this is simply how people learn, and that a story which respects how people actually learn will land in a way that a story full of lectures never can. And this is why the lullaby has to come first, before any of the loss. A lullaby is the one form of wisdom we receive before we have failed at anything, the one piece of truth handed to us at the very beginning, sung over us while we are too small to test it against experience. It cannot teach us anything yet. It can only wait. Elise sings to the infant Marceline that everything stays right where you left it, but it still changes, and the infant cannot possibly understand it, and the song lodges itself in her anyway, dormant, a seed. And then life happens. The mother is lost. Simon is lost. 1,000 years of loss happen. And slowly, episode by episode, decade by decade, the dormant song wakes up. Each loss is Marceline failing into a deeper understanding of the lullaby she was given before she could understand it. By the end, she finally knows what her mother meant, and she knows it not because the song explained it, but because she lived every word of it the hard way. That is the deepest structure of the whole show. The wisdom is given to you at the start, in a form too gentle to grasp, and then life spends years teaching you to understand the gift you already received. And there is one more thing the distribution of all this wisdom is quietly telling you. The thing the show wants you to carry out of Who and back into your own life. No one in Adventure Time is wise about everything. Jake is serene, but he is also lazy and selfish in ways that hurt people. Bubblegum is brilliant, but she cannot stop controlling. Finn is brave, but he is reckless and self-destructive. Marceline is ancient, and she is still afraid. Simon is the kindest man in the show, and he becomes its biggest fool. Each of them carries one hard-won piece of the truth, and is a complete disaster about the rest. And that is not a flaw in the show's design. That is, the design. Wisdom, the show is telling you, is not a state you achieve. It is a collection of small competencies, scattered across a community, each one purchased by a specific failure, none of them adding up to a finished person. You do not become wise. You become wise about one thing, the thing you failed at hardest, and you rely on the people around you to be wise about the rest. The curriculum of OO has no graduates. It only has students, helping each other through, each of them an expert in exactly one wound. And notice what the show is asking of you, the person watching, the person lying here in the dark, drifting towards sleep. It is not asking you to admire these characters. It is not even asking you to learn from them in the way you learn from a lecture. It is asking you to recognize yourself in them. Because you are also enrolled in a curriculum where nothing is ever taught and everything must be survived. You have lost people, or you will. You have tried to control something you loved and watched the control push it away, or you will. You have reached for someone who could not give you what you needed, or you will. You have stood behind someone frailer than you with your hands half raised, knowing you could not protect them, or you will. The show is not showing you Finn's wounds and Marceline's guardedness and Bubblegum's control because they are interesting characters. It is showing you these things because they are your things, dressed in candy colors so you can bear to look at them, so you can fall asleep to your own life made gentle and survivable and even beautiful. There is a reason all of this had to be put inside a children's cartoon, and it is the wisdom of the disguise. By dressing impermanence as a strawberry in a lullaby, and grief as a blue wizard who forgot a song, and the cost of growing up as a flower in a wound, and the price of love as a kiss in the middle of a crisis, the show lets you receive lessons that would be unbearable if delivered plainly. Nobody can sit still for a lecture on mortality. But everybody can listen to a dog who turned himself into a brick describe a rabbit in a storm. And somewhere in the listening, the lecture on mortality gets delivered anyway, gently, without your defenses going up, the way the deepest truths always have to arrive. The candy is not a way of hiding the lesson. The candy is the only delivery system soft enough to let the lesson through. Which brings us back to where this all began, to a woman singing in a kitchen that no longer exists, rocking a child who will outlive her by 1,000 years. Everything stays right where you left it, she sings, but it still changes. Listen to that line one more time, now that the whole curriculum has passed through it. It is not a sad line. It only sounds sad until you have lived inside the show long enough to understand it. It is the most consoling thing anyone in Adventure Time ever says, and it is said first, before any of the loss, so that all the loss has somewhere to rest. The strawberry dries up and it does not disappear. It stays in its spot and becomes something else. Simon forgets Marceline and the love stays in the tape. Finn loses his arm and a flower grows in the wound. The characters age and the world ends, and a new world rises in the same place, singing the same song. Nothing that you love is going to stay the way you found it, and nothing that you love is ever truly going to leave. Both of those things are true at the same time, and the entire show was built to help you hold them both without breaking. And so the lesson the whole show has been teaching, the one underneath all the smaller lessons, is the one the lullaby stated in its very first line, and the finale restated in its very last song. It is that loss and permanence are not enemies. We spend most of our lives believing that to love something is to be in a losing battle against time, that every attachment is a hostage given to a future that will take it away, and that the only safe move is to love less, to brace, to build the vaults Marceline built and the controls Bubblegum built. The show spends 10 seasons gently dismantling that belief. It shows you that the strawberry that dries out has not been destroyed, that Simon's love survives his forgetting, that the flower grows from the very wound of the loss, that the moment you shared with someone is folded permanently into time, that the people who are gone are not erased, but kept, exactly where you left them, changed. Everything stays. Everything changes. The whole show is the long, patient, beautiful proof that those two sentences are not a contradiction, but a comfort. The deepest comfort there is, the only one strong enough to hold a person through an actual life. That is the curriculum of change, which the lullaby teaches and Jake demonstrates by becoming a brick and sitting perfectly still. Loss, which Simon survives by spending himself away to nothing, and which I remember you proves cannot fully erase what two people built. Growing up, which costs Finn an arm, and teaches the Hall of Egress to walk with its eyes closed, and trusts Lemonhope to find out the hard way what freedom is for. And love, which what was missing says is honesty and not harmony, which Bonobo Bubblegum says is trust and not control, and which the finale says is worth choosing even though, especially because, everything changes. None of it was taught, all of it was survived. And you, lying here listening, half asleep, have been quietly enrolled in the same school the whole time, learning the same lessons the only way anyone learns them, which is by living, and failing, and being changed by the failing, and waking up the next day a little more able to hold the strawberry that is drying in its spot, staying exactly where you left it, becoming something else. So let the dust settle, let your eyes stay closed, the way Finn learned to keep his closed and walk forward anyway. The strawberry is drying in its spot, and it is not disappearing, it is only becoming something else. The way you are, the way everyone you love is, the way the whole world has always done, and will always do. There is a woman singing in a kitchen that no longer exists. There is a dog who turned himself into a brick to to learn how to be still. There is a man who forgot a little girl and kept loving her anyway. There is a boy with a flower growing out of the place where his arm used to be. There is a song, sung by friends, at the end of everything. That says, the moment you are in right now is happening forever. None of it was taught to any of them. All of it was survived. And it is enough. The show keeps insisting, gently, like a lullaby, to have been here at all, to have loved things that change, to have been one of the things that changes, and to stay, for as long as you are given, right where you were left, becoming. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.